In 1935, Sinclair Lewis wrote a novel, It Can't Happen Here. And that novel essentially was a warning because he believed it could happen here. It was an anti-fascist novel because he was very concerned about Mussolini and the Nazis. And his whole argument was that it can't happen here. But I would like to turn that around and say it can happen here. What can happen here, though, not in the negative sense, there can happen that we can reverse this. If we don't believe it can happen, it won't have a prayer of a chance. We can turn it around if we put the work and effort into it. Some people, will still be negative and they say, yeah, but how many times have you seen a revolution that really has turned out? All through the 20th century, so many revolutions and wars to end wars and all that. It never happened. And right now we still have neocons all over the place. They aren't all in one party either. They're in both of the parties, and that's what we have to be challenged. But there have been times in our history in the history of the world, where there has been successes. In 1850, the British passed a law. It was called the Repeal of the Corn Laws. And it was an introduction into free market economics, repealing mercantilism and protectionism, and ushered in the age of the Industrial Revolution. And it was a difficult time. Peel, who was the representative, had this passed. He worked for many, many years, and it was finally passed. And it was smoothly. There were a lot of special interests involved, but it worked. It was smoothly, and they transitioned from mercantilism into a much better system. In 1919, they decided in this country that we were going to take care of the American people to make sure the American people's habits were wise and frugal. And so they passed this prohibition of alcohol. And it was an absurdity. It didn't work. But what happened by the early 1930s? By 1933, the people rose up and said, this is ridiculous. Prohibition is bad. And they repealed prohibition. So someday we're going to wake up and say the same thing about all drugs and right now we're getting a lot more support for this. Repeal these drug laws, get rid of the crime associated with the drug law. In 1933, as Roosevelt took over, he ran believing his program in 1932 was balanced budget. He had the most conservative platform because Hoover wasn't doing such a good job. And he said that he would defend the gold standard and balance the budget and cut spending. Well, that didn't exactly happen because the first thing he did was made it illegal for an American citizen to own gold. I mean, that really told you something about what was happening. But it was illegal to own gold all the way up until 1975. So in 1975, why is gold illegal? And a law was passed, and we moved back in a direction, and the American people could own gold. It's a very important issue. In a free society, don't give up your right to own precious metal, and don't give up your right to own a weapon to defend yourself. But then we even made a little more progress because we had not minted any gold coins since the early 1930s. So in 1985, once again, as a consequence of the Gold Commission, one thing that they came out of that, what we came out with, they would not go along with the views that I had on gold at the time, and they said, well, we'll throw them something, so why don't we go back to minting gold coins again? Far from imperfect, not a gold standard, but it was a big thing. It was a big deal for us to take something minted. It was one of the few constitutional authorities that we have to mint gold and silver coins. So that was restored in 1985. Point being is that it isn't inexorable that we move in the wrong direction. We can start moving in the other direction. And Even if you would have asked me 5 years ago that we would have get the attention of the nation and we would have get the attention of the establishment Republicans, even where they felt compelled to talk about it in the platform, that I never dreamed that we would get attention to probably 75% of the American people say the Fed ought to be audited. So what is our big challenge? The big challenge is can we restore natural right, God-given rights to our people so that we emphasize the fact that return of liberty can solve so many of our problems. Economic policies means private property, contract rights, gold standard, and get the government out of this business of regulating. The market and property rights regulates quite well. Under those conditions, guess what happens in a free market? They say there'll be no regulations. No, the regulation is if you go bankrupt, you go bankrupt and you don't get bailed out by the government. So the really big question I think that we have to decide upon is which way are we going to go? We see the end of an era. Where is it going to go? And I think the choice is one of two. I do not think that there's going to be another Marxist come along and restore enthusiasm for Marxism. I don't think that tomorrow we're going to have the same thing as a Hitler or Mussolini, but I do think we have to worry about fascism, an expansion of what we already have, which is corporatism. The buddy system between big corporations, big banks with the government. And that is the reason that we have to be on the side of saying, yes, if you're big and you made your money because you had special benefits and bailouts and protectionism from the government, that is wrong. But if you're big because you sold a good product to us and we bought it and you got rich, you have a right to be rich for doing that. We do know that ideas do have consequences, and an idea, as I've often said, as time has come, can't be stopped. I really believe we're here. I think we're here. They're not going to be able to stop us, but we have to learn to know how to spot the fluff, the baloney, and get rid of it. Don't listen to it. But you just can't hit them over the head with a 2x4. It seems like maybe that's the best way to do it at times. You know, some people claim that I have not been, and I don't express my outrage enough. You should be more outraged. Look at what they're doing to you. How did you ever put up with that? What did you do all this? Then they'll say to me, how did you ever put it up with this in Congress 30 years and you're not yelling and screaming? But have you ever thought about it? What if I became outraged at everything they did wrong? I'd have been worn out in about 5 years for sure. But we do need to sort it out. We do need to know the good ideas from the bad ideas. We do need to persuade people. And politics plays a role in this. And I feel very blessed that I was able to be a professional person, practice medicine, which my wife describes as something I loved and I did. One of the reasons why I went back to my practice after being in Washington for 6-7 years. And politics is something that is beneficial if I had not run for Congress. And I consider there's a lot of luck in politics and winning a seat. And I don't think there's any luck in taking your positions. I think that is a freedom of choice and you make those decisions. So, but anyways, being in the right place in the right time has a lot to do with it. But I think every one of us has a responsibility because people in an audience like this know and understand the problem. You have more insight than essentially almost everybody in Washington. And I guess that's no challenge. But the difficult task is you have more responsibility.